Hey everyone, welcome to Mosaic. My name's Ian.
And I'm Tom. It's our pleasure to welcome you all here to Mosaic Church Online. Special welcome to our regulars and to those who are here for the first time. I just want to say I think it's no accident you've come today, so please stick around for the whole of the service.
Wow, hearing you speak, Tom, I feel like I'm on a plane. It's like a captain speaking. But anyways, if you're new here for the first time, let me tell you what you can expect. We're going to be here for about 45 minutes. And during that time, we're going to have a short game, which we'll go through in a little bit. The band's going to come. They're going to share a song with us. Jeremy's going to update us on what's happening in the life of Mosaic. And Andy's going to come and he's going to share the word.
And after Andy, we're going to have another song by our band, followed by the second part of our series with Jeremy and Priscilla, where we look at moving on and planning for the future.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to that one. And so what we're going to do now actually is we're going to actually get into the game. And the game is one that I personally really enjoy. It's called Guess the Logo. So let's kick off here. But for those of you at home, interact with us, all right? Take a guess of what you think it is in the comment box, and we'll tell you along and see who's brand conscious. So let's start. Tom, what do you think this one is?
Right, well the first one, it's 3 black stripes. It looks like the front of a shoe. Can you guess at home? I'm going to say Adidas.
Adidas, yes, Adidas. Fun fact about Adidas, they are brothers of the same company that owns Puma. So they broke up. Second one, this one's one that I'm sure our pastor would know because he's a bit of a buff in this area, but do you know?
Yeah, I think I've got a good guess as to what this one is. I believe it's a car brand. They sell a lot of them here in the UAE. I think it's Tesla.
That is correct, yeah, Tesla it is. This one, a little bit ambiguous, maybe something that people may not realize at the first glance. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a well-known drinks brand.
Yes.
And I can tell you it's not Coca-Cola.
I can also tell you, our pastor likes to drink a lot of this.
That means it's Pepsi.
Pepsi indeed. This one.
No, you must know this one.
I do. It's one that I was going to say close to my heart is probably one way to describe it, but it's one that I interact with every day.
Excellent. And I'm going to say that's the logo for our airline Emirates.
Yes, that is correct. Last one. I don't know if you know what this one is.
I'm struggling a little bit because it looks like so many things. And it's maybe intergenerational, but I have a slight idea. I think we're looking at a video app.
Yes.
And I'm going to take a guess that it's TikTok.
That's right. Very relevant for my generation and those younger than me. Yeah, 15-second videos where you dance. It's amazing. So yeah, that's it from us. We're now going to pass it off to the band. OJ and Dina, take it away.
Just one word, you calm the storms that surround me. Just one word, the darkness has to retreat. Just one touch, I feel the presence of heaven. Just one touch, my eyes were open to see. My heart can't help but believe that there's nothing that a God can do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Just one word, you heal what's broken inside me. Just one word, and you revive every dream. Just one touch, I feel the power of heaven. one touch. My eyes were open to see. My heart can help but believe. There's nothing that our God can do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. Oh, there's nothing that our God can do. There's not a prison wall He can break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can't do. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like the power of Jesus. I will believe for greater things. There's no power like the power of Jesus. Let faith arise, let all agree. There's no power like His power. There's nothing that our God can do. There's not a mountain that He can move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that Jesus can do. There's nothing that our God can do. There's not a prison wall He can break through. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that our God can do.
Well, thank you, OJ, Dina, Jed, Josh, Isaac. What a great group of people. I'm so honored to have you here at Mosaic. And what a great song. What a great reminder that there's nothing that our God can't do as we're going through tough times. I was speaking to Jerry, the woman that is in charge of our donations for people in need. And she told me that typically earlier on in the week that we only have food for around 10 people as we start the week. And it's just amazing for her to see how God shows up. People from Mosaic come and give bags of rice and noodles. People from outside that we don't even know show up and give food that we can give to people in need. And this past week, we were able to give food for a week for over 135 people. Wow, that is amazing. What generosity that you guys are doing. And thank you for your generosity for partnering with us, for allowing us to continue to do this. We have a really great message for you today. You see, have you ever watched a friend or a family member make a really bad decision? Well, I'm sure you have. Or get involved with something that you know is just not good for them. And you think to yourself, you know, I should say something. And then you think to yourself, no, that's just gonna make them mad. Well, what do you normally do in a situation like that? And what should you do in a situation like that? And what would you hope they do if the roles were reversed? Well, that's what we're talking about today with our speaking pastor, Andy Stanley. Thanks for being here.
So today we are wrapping up the series, and we are in part 6 of You're Not the Boss of Me. And if you've not been with us, the subtitle is How to Say No to the Emotions That Compete for Control, because all of us have certain emotions that compete for control of our mouth and our mood. And Jesus said that what's on the inside of us eventually comes on the outside of us, and consequently we need to not simply monitor what's going on with our behavior, because all of us are pretty good at monitoring our behavior. We need to develop the habit of monitoring our hearts. While I was doing this series, I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he was interviewing artist Amanda Palmer, and she talked about a conversation she had with a friend, and she quoted her friend, and I don't think she gave her friend's name, so I don't know who said this, but this was a friend of Amanda Palmer, and I love this quote. Here's what he said that she remembered that I wrote down. If you don't deal with your demons, they go into the cellar of your soul and lift weights. That is a great quote. The only thing I don't like about it is that I didn't come up with it myself. Now, this is so powerful, and the imagery is so true, right? If you don't deal with your demons, those things on the inside of you, not literal demons, but the stuff that just kind of got inside of you because of something that happened in your childhood or something that happened during high school or something that happened to you, and you're just dealing with that stuff. He so rightly said, if you don't deal with that stuff, it doesn't go away. It gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and eventually it impacts future relationships as well. And one of the ways that we identify what's going on in the cellar of our soul, and one of the ways we become aware that there's stuff in us that's going to come out of us that we need to deal with before it does, is by paying attention to the emotions that compete for control of our moods and our mouths. The emotions that compete for control of our moods, those dark times where we just go inward, and our mouths. So in this series, if you've been tracking along, we've talked about envy, we've talked about guilt, we've talked about anger. Last week we talked about fear, and generally speaking, those things are pretty easy to spot. But today, I want to spend a few minutes kind of going in a different direction, and I want to talk about the destructive emotions that actually disguise themselves as virtues. They disguise themselves as good things. They disguise themselves as compassion, as sympathy, as care and concern. Sometimes we even camouflage these emotions as love. Because the truth is, and we've all lived long enough to know this, that what we consider nice sometimes isn't always nice. And the truth is, care doesn't always feel caring. And love, if you're really gonna love somebody, it doesn't always feel loving. And what love actually requires of us can feel like anything but love. Now, if you're a parent, you know this, because at some point, every parent has to make their child hate them, or just about hate them, right? If you're gonna be a good parent, at some point, you have to do something that makes your child so mad, they may even say at some point, Mom, I hate you, or Dad, I hate you. And you have to be willing to face that fury and deal with that fury in order to do the right thing. And in that moment, it doesn't feel like love, and it doesn't feel like care, it feels like the opposite. But here's where this interfaces with our lives as adults. Fear of rejection, discomfort with conflict. Some of you are conflict averse. Apprehension around confrontation. These are emotions that basically disguise themselves as what? As sensitivity and concern, when in fact, they're just fear, discomfort, and apprehension. And I already know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you want fear and discomfort and apprehension to be the boss of you? No. And here's the challenge, especially for those of us who are Jesus followers. In order to love other people, in order to be for other people what other people need us to be for them, as we're going to see in a second, in order to be for other people what Jesus actually calls and commands us to be, we have to recognize fear for what it is, discomfort for what it is, our fear of engaging in things that are uncomfortable for what it is, call those emotions out and say, you know what, fear, you're not going to be the boss of me. Apprehension, you're not going to be the boss of me. And so I'm going to do what I need to do for the sake of this other person, even though it doesn't feel good to me right now. And there's another emotion that cloaks itself in the mantle of kindness and care and sensitivity, and it's this one. It's indifference. This is a terrible thing. It's not so much a feeling, it's not so much an emotion as a lack of a feeling or a lack of emotion where there should be one. It's a lack of concern where there should be concern. And the thing is, we rarely spot indifference in our lives because it's so embarrassing. Nobody is going to own indifference. Very few people are going to say, you know what, he's getting himself in a big mess relationally, but I don't care what happens to him. You know, if that keeps going on in their marriage, it's going to destroy their marriage, but I don't care what happens to them. What we say is this, you know, I see what's going on, but I shouldn't interfere. So I'm going to pretend like I'm just being sensitive. But in pretending to be sensitive, you are cloaking, you are hiding fear or indifference. Oh, you know what? They haven't even asked for my input. So I'm just being sensitive. I'm going to wait until they ask. I'm being sensitive. No, you're not being sensitive. You are hiding your fear and your discomfort with sensitivity. Oh, here's our big one, right? Well, that's none of my business. I mean, yeah, they're going to really regret that financially. You know what? He's going to wish he'd never met her ultimately. Yeah, that's not going to work out for him professionally. But you know what? It's none of my business. So here's the question. Do you want indifference to be the boss of you? Do you want to be so emotionally neutral because, hey, it's none of my business, they didn't ask me, that becomes the boss of you? Or let me flip it around this way. When you need someone to mind your business because you're not doing such a good job minding your business, are you going to want those people, those friends, to give into fear and and discomfort and give in to indifference? Are you going to want them to step up and interfere in your business if it keeps you from making things worse or keeps you from making a big mistake? And the answer is, even though it is so uncomfortable, we want people to step up and speak into our lives, even when it's uncomfortable for them. We want people who are willing to say to fear and discomfort, you are not the boss of me. Indifference, you are not the boss of me. I care, and it's because I care. I'm sensitive, and it's because I'm sensitive that I'm going to step in and say what will appear to be the insensitive and the uncomfortable thing. Now, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jesus follower, you can't listen to those unhealthy voices because there's another voice that's already spoken, the voice of the Good Shepherd, whose instructions don't always feel so good. In fact, one day Jesus is speaking, and I'm going to give you context in a minute, but here's kind of his bottom line in case you have to leave early. Okay, here's what Jesus said. Hey, if your brother or your sister, somebody you know, this is a relationship. It's not your literal brother or sister, but somebody you're in community with. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. To which you may conclude, you know what? That's reason enough right there to never, ever follow Jesus because I'm not ever, ever going to do that, right? I mean, let me ask you a question. Who does that? People who care. People who decide discomfort's worth dealing with if that's what it takes to love you. So what I want to do, because this is so stark and in your face, I want to back up a few verses and I want to give you the context because Jesus takes his audience on a little bit of a journey through 2 or 3 really important things, and then he finally lands the plane around this whole idea that we are supposed to confront people in sin. And as harsh as that sounds, when you hear the whole conversation at the end, you kind of go, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense, even though I don't feel like doing it and even though it is so uncomfortable. So here's how the conversation went. At that time, and Matthew was there for all of this. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked a question. They said, Jesus, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And the kingdom of heaven wasn't heaven out there somewhere. The kingdom of heaven was what Jesus was introducing to earth, a brand new value system that was in conflict with the kingdoms of this world. And he says, in this kingdom that you're establishing, who's the greatest? And of course, the apostles are thinking, or hoping he's going to point to them and say, well, somebody like Peter, or maybe somebody like Matthew. And he called, the text, Matthew says, he actually called a child to them and he placed the child among them. So he sees a kid in the audience, says, could you come up here a second? Or ask this mom or dad, will you bring your son or daughter up here? And he sets this child in front of the disciples. And Jesus says, I tell you, unless all of you guys, these are his closest followers, unless you change and you become like little children, you will never even enter the kingdom of heaven. And he's got their attention. And then he begins this teaching that's going to land with this uncomfortable command. He says this, if anyone causes one of these little ones, and now he's expanding the audience beyond this single child to anyone who has begun following him. If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me, that's why we know he's talking now about the adults that have begun to follow him. If anyone causes one of these new people, these little ones who believe in me, to stumble That is to fall down, to get tripped up, to go out of bounds, to get thrown off course. In other words, if anyone comes along and throws something down in front of them that causes them to stumble or go backwards or lose their way, it would be better for that person to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. It would be better to take a stone that's the shape of a wheel that a donkey would push around and around and around to crush grapes, to have that hung around a person's neck and to drop them into the sea. Hyperbole. He's making an extreme point. He's making an extreme case because he's making an extreme point. He wants everybody's attention. And he says this. He says, whoa. I love it when he says, whoa. That's like, attention, please. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to stumble. In other words, things are going to come along in our lives that cause us to get tripped up. But he says, such things must come, but woe to the person through whom they come. Now, this is so important for all of us. He says it's one thing for somebody to get tripped up because something they couldn't help or something came along in life, that, there was an illness or they lost their job or something they had no control over happened and they, in dealing with it, they kind of lost their way for a while. He said, you know what? That kind of stuff's going to happen. But woe to the person that is the cause for a person to actually throw something in someone's way or to get in someone's way or to cause someone to lose their way. This was Jesus' way of saying, the way we say it is, hey, please don't be somebody's mistake. Don't ever be somebody's regret. Don't ever trip somebody up in their marriage. Don't ever trip somebody up with their reputation. Don't ever trip somebody up in terms of their professional career or their progress. Don't get in the way. Don't be somebody's mistake. Don't be somebody's regret. And how big of a deal is this whole stumbling thing to Jesus? He keeps going. He says this. Now, we've talked about there are things you can't avoid that might cause you to stumble. We've talked about people who cause people to stumble. And now he talks about us getting in our own way when it comes to causing people to stumble. Here's what he says, and this is extreme, and don't leave early. If your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off, here's the key word, and throw it away. It's like, okay, literally? No, don't leave early, not literally. Here's his point. If there is something you have control over that has the potential to trip you up or cause you to stumble, deal with it. And if your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. And again, here's the word, throw it away. In other words, if there's anything in your life that has the potential to get you off course, to create a regret, to create a season of your life that you'll wish you could go back to and relive. If there's anything you have control over right now that could potentially trip you up or is tripping you up, he says, get rid of it. And the reason he uses such extreme measures is because God loves you so much, he would do anything to keep you from being tripped up, stumble, and fall out of bounds in terms of your moral life, your financial life, your marriage life, your relationship life, any area of your life. He says, this is a big deal because you're a big deal. This requires extreme response because of how much I love you. And then he says this, it is better for you to enter life without one eye than to have two eyes and to be thrown into the fire of Gehenna. Now, the key word here, he's doing a little linguistic thing around this word thrown. Here's what he's saying. It is better for you to throw things out of your life than for your entire life to be thrown into chaos. It is better for you to take extreme measures while you are still in control before your life spins out of control and you find your entire life in chaos. The word Gehenna is actually a literal place in the south side of Jerusalem. And hundreds of years before Jesus was teaching, the Israelite people or the Hebrew people at the time, they actually sacrificed their own children to Moloch, who was a pagan god, and God judged the nation. So this area of Jerusalem became a place that was considered cursed. Eventually it became the garbage dump, and there was always fires and things being burned all the time. So this was a literal thing. And Jesus was making a very important point. It is better to throw some things away from your life than to have your life thrown into chaos. It is better to throw whatever you can away from you than to have your entire life thrown into chaos. Because when your entire life is thrown into chaos, it becomes hell on earth, doesn't it? Have you ever stumbled? Yeah, you've stumbled. And once you've stumbled and something becomes an addiction, once something becomes irreversible, once something becomes legal that you wish you'd never gotten involved in and now you can't get out of it without doing something illegal, isn't it true that you wish you could go back to the time when it began and throw something out of your life? There's some of you that wish you had thrown away a phone number, but you didn't. And you didn't throw away the phone number, and now your life is thrown into chaos, and you wish you could go back and throw away a phone number. You wish you could delete a text, but instead of deleting the text, you responded to the text. You responded to the text, and eventually it threw your life into chaos, and you wish you could go back and throw away the text instead of having your whole life thrown into chaos. I could go on and on. Some of you wish you had never taken that first drink. Instead of taking it, you wish you had thrown it away. If you could go back, you would throw it away, because it is better to throw that away than for your whole life to be thrown into chaos through an addiction to alcohol or an addiction to anything. So why does Jesus say take extreme measures? Because he loves you extremely and he cares for you. And again, every parent here understands what we would say to our own children in this same capacity. And then Jesus switches gears just a little bit, and he says this, and I love this. He says this, what do you think? Wouldn't it be cool to be standing there with Jesus and he's like, so what do you think? And if you're smart, you don't say anything, because you'll be wrong, okay? You just go, I don't think I'm gonna share my thoughts right now, and you probably already know my thoughts anyway. So Jesus starts this whole conversation off. It's so cool. He says, okay, you guys, what do you think? And then he tells a very familiar parable that you have heard before, but probably not in this context. Because one of the things that's important to remember is this. Jesus taught for about 3 years, and he repeated many of these parables and many of these stories over and over and over and over to make sure the people within Judea and Galilee got it. So now he takes a parable that you've heard in one context, he puts it in a different context. Here's what he says. He says, if a man owns 100 sheep, which to us is just odd, but to them, that was the world they lived in. If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, or to use the word he's going to use throughout this teaching, if one of them stumbles away, if one of them stumbles off, if one of them gets lost or loses its way, will the man or will the shepherd not leave the 99 on the hills and go look for the one that wandered off? And everybody in Jesus' audience is like, yeah, that's what you do. You leave the 99 and you go look for the one that stumbled away. Then he says this, and you know what happens next? If he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, he says, in the same way, your heavenly Father is not willing that any of these little ones should stumble, should perish, should be lost to him. Now, if Jesus would have stopped right here, this is so good, isn't it? You don't want people to stumble because you love us. That's great. So if I stumble away, you are going to come looking for me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Jesus. Give me a J, give me an E. This is so great. And we'll see you later, Jesus. Thanks for that teaching. And Jesus says, no, we're not done. Come back. Because you're my followers, right? We're like, yes, we're your followers. He says, well, you're involved in this process. And I know we don't want to be involved in the process. We want you to do it. He's like, no, that's not how it works. You're involved in the process. So when you see someone you know, when you see someone you care about, when you see someone you love stumble, fall, get tripped up, if your brother or sister, because this is the next verse, if your brother or sister sins, wanders off, gets tripped up, you go and you point out their fault, to which we say, no, we don't go, we pray. We just pray. We pray that somebody would come along, not us, would come along. We pray that you would do a miracle. We pray that you would send a dream, a vision, that something would happen. Jesus says, no, don't pray, go. Don't pray, go. I made up the don't pray. He said go. You go. Because we default to pray. In fact, we don't just pray, we gossip as a prayer request. Like, I just need you to pray for my friend Bill. He's having a real hard time. I'm not going to give you his last name, but it's Bill. And all of you know him. Last name starts with an F. Anyway, I don't want to go any further than that. Let's just pray for Bill. And Jesus is going, no, you don't pray. You go. But that is so uncomfortable. I want to be sensitive. I want to give him his privacy. Jesus is going, you're not being sensitive. You're being insensitive. I want you to go whether you feel like it or not. And don't tell anybody, and don't share a prayer request. And he covers that. He says, you just go between the two of you. You just show up. And to our response is, but it's none of our business. It's none of my business. And Jesus' response is, I just made it your business. Their business is your business because their business is my business, and I love them, and I'm sending you. We're like, I don't know if that's the loving thing to do. It's the most loving thing to do. He goes on, if they listen to you, here's some good news. If they listen to you, you have won them over. Whenever they tell their story, they'll bring up your name and say, then Sally showed up, then Bart showed up, then Phyllis showed up, or then, whatever your name, and then Brandy showed up, and we had this awkward conversation. And forever and ever, you will be a permanent, positive part of their story, right? We're like, good, can we stop there? Jesus is like, no, because it rarely works out like that. There are very few happy endings to going to your brother or your sister to point out their sin. Very few times are they going to go, you're right, thank you. But if they will not listen, because they probably won't. If they will not listen, well, to which we go, okay, if they will not listen, okay, I've done my part, right? I did what you said. I confronted them. It was so awkward. I'm not sure they'll ever speak to me again, but we're done, right? And I get extra credit. Like, I'm the best Christian in my whole church. I don't have to go to church for a month because I did what very few Christians will do, right? Jesus is like, no. I want you to go back, and this time I want you to take some people. It's like, what? I mean, Jesus, give it a rest. I mean, I did the most unusual thing. I poked my nose in their business. He says, no, take a couple of people with you that know them, because every matter has to be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. I mean, what is this, court? I mean, who does this? Seriously, who does this? Good shepherds, your heavenly Father, people who aren't going to hide behind sensitivity, and I'm just giving them space, and I'm just going to pray when in fact you're just scared or indifferent or just too worried about what might happen, the consequence. That's who does that. If they still refuse to listen, you take it another step. Tell it to the assembly. Now, in your English Bibles, you'll find the word church here, which was ecclesia, which should never have been translated church, but that's another story for another day. The word actually means assembly, and besides, by the time when Jesus was teaching this, there was no church. He says, look, if this person continues to wreck and ruin their life and maybe wreck and ruin other people's lives or their behavior, you actually take them to the community of people that know them and care about them, and you confront them as a community. The people who love them and can restore them. And I know you don't think it's any of our business, but you know what? We love you too much for it not to be our business. And then Jesus says, and then if they refuse to listen, even to the assembly, treat them as you would a Gentile or a tax collector. What this is saying, this is so important, is see, when you confront somebody because there's something going on in their life where they're hurting themselves, the assumption is that they see the world the way you do. Every time you confront someone, you're assuming a shared worldview. You're assuming some shared values. Jesus says, when it finally occurs to you that you guys aren't even on the same page, that you don't share the same worldview, you don't share the same values, then you choose a different approach. Then you approach them as someone who doesn't share your worldview and who doesn't share your values. You back off. Now it's not any of your business. Because the assumption going in, it's my business because we have common ground. Now, we get this completely the opposite. Because when somebody's doing something that's gonna mess up their lives or mess up their family, what we do is we don't do anything. Jesus says, no, you immediately do something, and then eventually you may not do anything. But you don't not do anything until you are sure, you know what? I went, we went, the community went. Clearly, they don't care. Clearly, what we want for them is not what they want for them. Clearly, the way they view the world is not the way we view the world. So we're going to begin treating them like somebody who just has a different worldview. Do we love them? Of course you love them, but you love them differently. Any questions? This is horrible, isn't it? This is terrible. Why would Jesus do this? Because he loves you. So here's the whole verse. If your brother or sister sins, go. Point out their fault, just between the two of you, and if they listen, you have won them over. And you do this whether you feel like it or not. Now, Sandra and I, my wife and I, have done this so many times through the years. And I'll tell you why. Because many, many years ago, when we were first married, there were 2 or 3 situations where we didn't. And we saw what happened. And in one particular case, we were so overwhelmed with grief and remorse that we didn't say something when we knew we needed to say something. But we were afraid, and we backed off, and we would do what most people do. And we decided all those years ago, you know what? If it ruins relationships, if it ruins relationships even with family, we will not be silent anymore, because love is not silent when there's something that needs to be said. And I've got to tell you, We've done this so many times, together and separately. It rarely works out well. It rarely goes well, rarely. Every once in a while, eventually, someone will come back and thank us. But for the most part, it doesn't go well. But we just decided, love, it's not silent. Indifference, uncomfortable, that's what's quiet, that's what's silent. So please, don't camouflage. Don't camouflage your fear, your discomfort, your apprehension, and your indifference with concern about making someone uncomfortable. Woe, Jesus says, woe to those who cause someone to stumble. But blessed are those who go, and favored are those who declare. You know what? Fear, discomfort, apprehension, indifference, you are not the boss of me. Love forbids me to remain silent. Love forbids me from minding my own business when I notice somebody else needs somebody to mind their business, especially when it's somebody I know. So here's what I want to say to you, and then we're going to close. Because as I'm talking, I won't ask you to raise your hand. Somebody's coming to mind, aren't they? And you're like, Here's what I just want to say to you. Please don't let your emotions keep you from doing what you know you need to do. Somebody needs to hear from you. Their future may depend on it. Somebody needs to hear from you. And there are no guaranteed outcomes, and you don't do this because you know it's going to work. You do this because Jesus commanded you to do it. And the really cool, amazing thing about this principle is this. You see, as Christians, and if you haven't heard me say this before, you're going to hear me say it over and over and over. Many of you have heard me say it before. The thing is this, when Jesus, right before Jesus was arrested, he said, guys, I'm just giving you one command, just one. This is it. You don't have 10, just one command. And the command is this, you are to love others as I have loved you. And that's all this is. This is simply doing for others what God through Christ has done for us. This is just one more way to love, the way that we have been loved.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathe your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me.
When I felt the worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it changes mountain you won't climb up, coming after me.
There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me.
There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, lives the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Well, thank you, Priscilla, for being here again to continue this conversation really about mental health. It's such a broad topic that one week we felt like was just not enough. Last week, you gave us all of your tips and tricks. We've been in a time period of where stress has been building up. It's been about 14 weeks now since the lockdown started. And people are starting to feel it. And last week you told us that the two things that really helped through that time is a routine and relationships. So
Yeah.
can you give us a quick recap of what you talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So routine is really important just to create stability. So if you wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning to get ready to go to work, then even though in lockdown, in quarantine, you still wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you finish work at 5 o'clock in the evening, then make sure you're closing your laptop at 5 in the evening. It's so important to have that routine, to have, even to set the space in the house where you're working and, where you leave that space to come and have meals at the dining table. So it's just bringing structure and routine in your day, even though you're in lockdown. The next thing is just relationships. More than any time in our lives, this is the season where we really need each other. We cannot do without people. We don't do well in isolation. And so we have to take intentional steps to connect with people. So whether you're picking up the phone to call someone, or you're sending a voice note, I mentioned it's important to just hear voice. Don't just drop a WhatsApp message. Just pick up the phone, call someone, engage with people. That's key.
Yeah, that's both really, really helpful
Yeah.
tips. Well, I know this past week I had quite a few friends who lost their jobs. And that can bring just another level of stress that
Yeah.
if they were already experiencing stress to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah.
So how can we not just survive through this time, but actually thrive through this
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a hard one to concise into a short conversation, but I'm going to try my best. Losing something, anytime we lose something, is obviously you're going through a period of grief as well. So there's a sense of loss. And so we kind of have to acknowledge that we have lost, and this is a job, and where a job has probably kept most of us here in the UAE as well. So it's a big loss. It's a financial loss, and then that probably would require us a decision now. What are we going to take in the next season of life? Are we going to move out? Are we going to stay here? What's going to happen? So first thing is to really just understand the level of grief, acknowledge that there has been a loss. But the thing about grief is that it can keep us stuck. If we don't start to process through those feelings of grief, sadness, what happens eventually, we get stuck in discouragement, we get demotivated, unable to see what's coming in our future. Because one of the things that that helps us move from sadness to survival to thriving is to be able to walk through seasons like this where it's uncomfortable. I tell people all the time, get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I think that's key. Yeah.
It's not easy, but we've got to. I mean, life is full of challenges. This is just one really unusual challenge, of course. So to process through grief, it's key. We need to be able to process our feelings of sadness and loss. So what really helps in moving us forward is to start to plan the future. In a sense, it's to start to have vision for what is to come, because we all have to rebuild our financial lives. We all have to rebuild our new lives if we are moving out of the country. What is that going to look like? So basically coming up with a plan.
Yeah.
Looking at coming up with a plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know for me as a pastor, I say all the time that vision leaks. So maybe is it the same way where you have to continue to tell yourself, hey, this is where we're headed.
Yeah.
Because maybe you forget, or that vision leaks away. What are some tips that you can give that will help people move forward?
So that's really great that you say vision leaks, because that's absolutely it. Because once we start planning for our future, it gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us a sense of like we're building something again. So they may have been lost, but we're building a new future. We're building a new life. We're building a new financial plan. Because a lot of us will probably have to look at our finances and see how now we have to manage, strategize. There's a lot that's involved now. So this is where it's interesting from where I spoke last week, where relationships are key. Now we get to lean into our spouse or lean into someone else to get wisdom on how to plan our finances, for example. So sit down and look at that. We pull out the map, the budget sheets and all of that. What is that going to look like moving forward? You're planning for 3 months or you're planning for 6 months. That's just one aspect. We are writing down what is it going to look like now if we if we budget, how much do we have to save? If you're going to be now moving in a month's time, the things that we need to do. So really, when we're sitting and doing a plan, we're writing things down. And I always tell people it's good to start to write things down rather than visualize it in your head. We've got to write it down, because the more we write it down, the more we can see it, the more clear it becomes. So writing our plan, building our future, it's our finances, our relocation, or maybe we're looking at innovating ourselves here. We're looking at perhaps setting up ourselves here differently in the UAE. Maybe we'll start our business that we always put on the back burner. When we start to build like that, what happens is we're now taking risk. And so when we start to actually take risk and we're starting to think through these things, the fear is sort of dissipating. We're not being controlled by fear, because every time we step out of the boat and try to do something different, there's no longer fear. And we realize what's in front of us was actually, okay, this is not so bad. So it's one step and the next step and the next step. And as we keep moving forward, before you know it, you're not even worried anymore. You've got a sense of purpose that you're building towards.
I see. So planning for the future helps relieve some of the stress.
Absolutely.
And I know when I've experienced when I start planning for the future, I'm really planning for things I think are going to happen, but it may not happen.
Yeah.
How does someone, and I think you talked about this a little bit last week, talking about trust.
Yeah.
Because really you're making decisions on the future that you really don't know. You're kind of guessing, honestly, but you're trying, it's an educated guess.
Yeah.
I would say, but maybe talk a little bit about trust again and maybe trusting God throughout this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we actually, and people probably are not aware of this, we come into this world, the first thing that we learn when our parents changed our diapers and gave us milk is to actually understand basic trust. Basic trust is actually being developed on the inside. We learn to trust people, we learn to trust our caregivers from the time we are babies. And so that's it's interesting, because that's how God designed us to be. And the more that we can trust, whether it's trust God and trust people around us, the less we fear. And so one of the key things is, if people are going through so much of stress and, when it comes to stress, when we talk about stress, really it has its roots in fear. Yeah. Even anxiety and worry, it's all rooted in fear. And the Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. So we got to learn how to overcome fear in difficult seasons. And the main thing is to actually learn to trust. Where we are so shaken, the reason is because we lack trust. So whether it's trust in God, or I say this very commonly as well to people whom I work with, the more self-sufficient we are, the less we trust.
The way that I've heard it spoke about is where do I put my focus? You know, when I'm really worried, I'm putting my focus, or you can almost put trust in that fear, and that I'm putting my trust in the worry.
Yep.
But if I take my focus off of that and I put my focus on God, on my relationships, that fear tends to be less.
Absolutely. So it's turning our focus from inward to outward. So I'm outwardly focusing on God now.
Yeah.
I'm outwardly focusing on community now. Every time we turn our focus outward, the less stress we feel, the less fearful we become. That actually builds trust. So that's key. That's fundamental. And so the basic step at this point of time is, and sometimes trust and having faith is, you don't see the whole picture.
Yeah. That happens a lot, actually.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
You kind of have to, trust that voice, or trust that spouse, your spouse, or trust God, or trust your leader in your community. That, you know what, just this is the time to kind of step out of the boat and walk on water. You can actually do it. You just have to give it a try. So every time we try something new, or we step out and we start to do something differently, we change our focus. All of that helps us move forward. So we move from survival mode and we start thriving, because we're moving forward. Because we are people that we need to keep moving forward. If we're stuck, we're going to have more stress. The key is to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's very helpful. I know for a lot of people who have lost their jobs recently, that the key to move from surviving to thriving is to continue to move forward and keep your focus on moving forward. Keep your focus on your family, your friends, God.
Yeah.
And that's going to lower the stress and help you move to a thriving.
Absolutely. And just keep in mind that God says in Jeremiah 29:11 that we always have, God has a plan and a purpose for us.
Yeah.
So it always is a plan. There's always a good outcome. Eventually it's going to turn out to be okay.
I found that so true in my life so many times.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you, Priscilla. I know this is going to really help a lot of people, and I just thank you for your time. And if someone wants to get in contact with you, how would they find you?
They can go up, look me up on my website at estherprojectdxp.com. So that's Esther, ESTHER, DXP.com.
Great. Well, I hope that you're able to help a lot more people like you've helped us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, that was awesome. What did you learn from that conversation, Tom?
Well, I thought it was very good. I was listening carefully to what Priscilla said about moving forward, about making a plan, going by step, involving friends and family, and also writing it down. Very important. So I'm going to do a lot of that this week. Thank you, Priscilla and Jeremy, for those ones. Talking about this coming week and what to expect in next Friday's service, we're going to be starting a new series called Better For It. And in that, we're going to be looking at how things are affecting us during this time of COVID-19, and obviously what we can learn from it, what I can learn from it, and what we can gain from it going forward. So be sure to join us next Friday to start that new 3-part series.
Yeah, look, I'm really excited for that. And I'm also excited because we're moving to so many digital platforms. And one of those platforms that's actually quite relevant for us is YouTube. And YouTube, we've currently got a goal of trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We know we can do it. All we got to do is engage with you guys, share with your friends, with your families, and those that are in need. Because we really believe we've got content that can help people and meet people where they are. And above all, we put so much effort in this, and we know for Jeremy, he's really passionate about this. So let's make Jeremy an influencer. 1,000 subscribers. I'm really excited. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again, and take care. Have a great week.